like to call a meeting of the Willits City Council to order for Wednesday, August 24th. Will you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, let's see who's here.
Okay. Councilman Stransky?
Yes.
Madrigal? Here. Weinstein?
Here.
And Burton?
Here. Public communications. Do we have any public communications is limited to stuff that is items which are not on the agenda? No action will be taken. 3 or 4 minutes will be allowed. And yes, sir.
Yes, sir. My name is Lanny Cutler. I am presently General Manager of KLLG, Willits' own low-power radio station. As you may know, we're on the air. We've been on the air for a couple of weeks. We're off the air today and tomorrow for equipment adjustments, but we'll be back on the air on Friday. Let me bring you up to date. We're in test mode to see how far our signal goes. So far, got reports, good reports of signal strength, high and clear. Pine Mountain, this side, deep into Brook Trails, the entrance to Golden Rule Ranch, Red Hill, String Creek, First Gate, and of course, really everywhere within the bowl of Little Lake Valley, loud and clear. Comes to you from a small antenna, very small, at the Grange, where our studios are located. We couldn't have done it without participation from the citizens of Willits. In fact, we couldn't have done it without a few people who are sitting in this room right here tonight. So I sincerely invite you in the next week to stop by the Grange and see something that you may never see again, and you won't have a chance to see it after a week. You can see our studios. The stud walls are up, the electric wiring, the audio, the internet, the power, the telephone cables are threaded through these studs, and you can see just how the on-the-air studio will be. A week from now, sheetrock will be up. If there are any of you here or at home interested in having a radio show, a local radio show, now's the time to talk to us. We're putting together a list of potential programmers. Over 20 people have already taken 2 workshops, one on audio editing and the other on just the protocols of the station and the FCC. I was thrilled to see so many people come and focus their attentions for an hour and a half and for half a day. We'll have our grand opening on October 22nd when, right next door, upstairs at the Arts Center, when our own Dirt Floor Band is putting on a dance concert benefit for KLLG. Between now and then, we'll be on the air, and there'll be messages going out to all of our citizens, but we're going to make hoopla on the 22nd and a few days preceding that.
October 22nd?
October 22nd.
Thank you.
We need the support of everyone to make this happen. It really does take a community to raise a community radio station. We need members, we need underwriters. We can't say advertisers on community radio. Donations, large and small, and your attendance at our fundraising events. KLLG is of, by, and for the people. It is not my radio station. It is not really the Grange's radio station, though we're providing it. It is really for everybody, for all sides. Its mission is to entertain, inspire, and provide information so that we can be more resilient should there be hard times ahead. Our police department and our city have supported us. Our citizens have rallied and become volunteers and helped raise those walls. Now, underwriting, that's where the businesses come in. And a key, I'll leave you with this note. A key is that 100% of the listeners of KLLG 100% are potential customers to all the businesses in Willits. Only a low-power local radio station can say that. So check us out at 97.9 on your dial, KLLG.org website, and I'll bet you guys can guess our telephone number, 459.
KLLG.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Lanny. Way to go, way to stick with that. You deserve a lot of credit for, I know it hasn't been a downhill pull. Do we have any other public communication this evening? Second, third, and last call. Seeing none, we will move on to our consent calendar. Do I hear a motion on the consent calendar?
I'll move we approve.
Second it.
Have a motion, a second. Any public comment on the consent calendar? And then we'll have a roll call vote.
Councilor Ostrowski?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Madrigal?
Yes.
Weinstein?
Yes.
Mayor Burton?
Yeah. I don't think we've done anything too controversial yet tonight, but you do have a right to appeal the decisions of the city council, generally limited to 90 days. Consult 1094.6 of the Code of Civil Procedure if you wish to do it. Let's move along to city manager reports.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to introduce our newest employee, Karen Stevenson, is our new HR analyst.
Hi, Karen.
Hi,
She started,
Welcome.
thank you, looking forward to it.
Great.
started last Friday, and I just can't tell you how thrilled I am to have her aboard.
Very good.
Public Works. The crew did a great job replacing the old culverts on East Valley. We did that in-house. We're expecting a written report from a second arborist any day, and we'll share that once we receive it. So this is in relation to the trees in City Park. We did take down 2 trees in recent days that were near the playground because we have a huge risk there, and we need to make sure that that area is safe first and foremost. Main Street water line, that project should be completed the week after Labor Day. The high school tie-in is scheduled for next Tuesday after school, pending the approval by the high school principal. The entire main line is in, and now the contractor is working on service connections, which will be followed by paving. At our water plant, I'm happy to report that, well, first of all, the truck fill station is now up to 4 customers with more inquiries. Morris and Centennial are still hovering at around 80% capacity. And we have updated test results. So our total trihalomethanes and on our halicetic acids. So the abbreviation is TTHMs and HA5s. Last year we were out of compliance at different times. This year we have reduced by basically cut the constituents by 50%. And so we've just made tremendous progress there. I want to really acknowledge both our water and wastewater operators for the exceptional job that they continue to do, saving money to the city and our constituents by doing these projects in-house. Wastewater, the first blower is being moved into the building, was moved into the building today. It will be about 1 to 2 weeks before it's up and running. And some modifications will need to be made as new ones are a little bit bigger than the old ones. John Sherman will report more in depth on this, but today we had an abatement warrant for outdoor cultivation, and over 200 plants were cut down. As part of that, these are zip ties, 25 of them that were on some of those plants. They're issued by the sheriff's office, and apparently they do not verify addresses, just issue the zip ties. Staff has contacted them twice about the conflict with city ordinance. But I just wanted to remind our city residents that per our municipal code, we prohibit all outdoor cultivation. regardless of any medicinal purpose or issuance of zip ties. And that the sheriff's office doesn't have jurisdiction within the city of Willits. I want to acknowledge both the Public Works crew and Willits PD for their assistance in today's efforts.
Nice.
And then on September 11th, we'll have our annual Patriots Day celebration. It will be in City Park at 2 p.m. It's a Sunday. And that's the reason for having it later, well, in the afternoon instead of the morning. And the next council meeting is on...
The city, this part?
Yeah.
And what was the reason?
Because it's a Sunday, a lot of people
Oh,
go to church,
okay.
or there are, I think this time of year, soccer games in the morning,
Okay.
so it's just to accommodate.
So what time is that?
2 p.m. The next council meeting is on September 14th, so 3 weeks from tonight. And one of the things we'll be doing at that meeting is having a workshop for the housing element update, which Dusty will report on a little bit further. And that concludes my reports.
All right.
What was the date again, excuse me, Adrian?
September 11th.
Well, that's the memorial for the September 11th, but the 14th is our next meeting.
Right.
Not sure which one.
So let's move along to anything from the city clerk.
Not tonight. Thank you.
All right. Finance snuck out here a few minutes ago. Nice
So it's not
on.
her item later on, the cost allocation?
That was informational reports.
Information.
Oh, goodness.
We're past
That's
it.
a lot of, okay, got it.
So human resources, we'll give you the night off tonight, but we'll expect a lengthy report next week.
Not that there's any pressure.
Would you mind just standing up and introducing yourself a little bit? Tell us what your previous experience, just introduce yourself to the community a little bit. We're tickled to have you, but I'd like people to.
You only have to
Put you
come
on the
over
spot.
here because,
TV.
yeah.
That's fine.
Sure. My name is Karen Stevenson, and I had retired with AT&T after 36 years, and I spent 18 of those years with Human Resources. So I was looking for something new, and I think coming to a public sector versus a private sector is going to be interesting. It'll keep me busy. I've enjoyed working with everyone so far. Willits, I got a tour yesterday from Adrian, and it's a lot bigger than I even thought of. So I'm pretty excited about it. I have lengthy knowledge in all HR positions. I supported the United States and Puerto Rico, so got an extensive background in bargaining and grievances and policies and discipline, and I'm actually looking forward to it because I want to see what's going to happen with Willits going forward and what we can do to help our employees remain with us and be strong because they are our community.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as a former AT&T employee.
No telephone things. No. Thank you.
She can't give you a discount.
Anything in the legal beagle department?
I just wanted to give an update about the status of the $4 million that Pepsi entrusted to the city, and the city then provided this $4 million to the Howard Foundation for use in the new construction of the new hospital. And that happened back in 2007, and it was all done pursuant to an order from Judge Susan Nilsson of the Federal District Court. And the money was to be used initially toward the construction of the hospital. 2 years later, that order was amended to say that it could be used to purchase necessary hospital equipment, and the examples in the judge's order were X-ray machines and MRI machines and defibrillators. And so earlier this year, of course, the Howard Hospital was open, and it's fully equipped, I understand, and operating. But we have never received an accounting of that money, and it's our understanding that Adventist Health, who constructed the new hospital, has not used that money, but there may be some present plans for the Howard Foundation to purchase equipment that will be used at the hospital. And there's an important deadline that's coming up. It's September 15. The judge's order requires that that money be used toward this purchase of necessary hospital equipment by September the 15th. And if that deadline is not met, then the order provides that the money should be returned to the city, and the city council will make some other public health related use of those funds. So unless Adrian or others know more than I about the status of this money, I would suggest that perhaps the mayor or Adrian write a letter to the foundation inquiring about the status of the money, and have they, or do they intend to comply with the judge's order by that September 15th deadline?
I had a question, I guess primarily of Adrian. I think I emailed you after our last meeting. I know you were out for a few days. Did you ever, it was about some of the contacts that different individuals on the council, but not as a council, had with a couple different proposals, and I wondered if we should be reporting on that. One of the AM&D building, and the other one is skunk train inquiries about how to facilitate the repair of the tunnel and that sort of stuff.
On the skunk train, I believe that they will be coming to the council at some point to, once they determine what they wish to propose.
Do we have any questions on this particular item?
Well, it was.
Does it relate? I'm trying to figure out.
It's relating to the administrative report, because these were.
No, I get that, but
Okay.
relative
But no,
to.
not relative to, I'm sorry,
to-
not relative to that, no.
To this report. You know,
No.
I'd be curious to why, if they've had this money for 9 years, it is only towards the impending deadline that they're.
That's what deadlines are for.
Do we have any idea why?
Well, we do. I understand from talking with the attorney for Adventist Health that there was some concern that if Adventist Health were to use this money for the construction of the hospital, that it could make that project a public project subject to prevailing wage issues. And so I think that Adventist Health had some reluctance to using the money because of the risk that they might then have to pay prevailing wage for the job.
So somehow they, okay. Well, I will send, and with your review, I would be happy to send a letter and ask for an accounting of that money.
Because I have spoken to Rick Bachman of the hospital, and he suggested that they still have ideas to use that, but I don't know if their issues have been resolved that they had identified previously as to why they hadn't done it before.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Let's move up to Chief. No report. Okay. School started.
Yes.
Lots of cars on the street between 7:45 and 8:15. I can attest to that. Dusty? Dusty's our community planner. Probably shouldn't use such informal recognition.
That works for me.
Mr. Dooley.
You got me feeling a little underdressed today, though. Just real quickly, tomorrow night we have our downtown streets and alleys circulation study public workshop. It's here at the community center here at City Hall. Start at 5:30. We got a presentation at 6 o'clock. We're looking again to sort of enhance the viability of downtown, make it a little bit safer place to navigate, a little funner place to hang out. Also, we've got our Revid Ed meeting on Tuesday at 4 o'clock. That's a public meeting. That's here in the chambers. Everyone's welcome to attend. One of the funner things on that agenda is we are going to be reviewing a draft ordinance to try to help out with our vacant commercial buildings in downtown. And then, as our city manager alluded to, I think at our September 14th meeting, we'll be having a housing element study session. Every 5 years, we're required to update our housing element. And so, for example, this would be an opportunity for members of the public to let us know if we needed to address any type of housing needs in the community, whether it was senior housing, affordable housing, mini mansions, etc. So I encourage folks to attend and participate in that council session as well.
What time was that again, the Tuesday one?
The 4 o'clock Revid Ed meeting?
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Could I just
Doug.
ask?
Sure.
For the Brown Act, we have 2 members of our council on the committee. Is that something where other members of the council can or cannot either listen in or?
It's a public meeting, I believe you can show up, but you can't speak.
That's
Okay.
right.
Is that correct?
It's the
Contribute,
fly on
yeah.
the wall analogy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Public Works, Mr. Sherman.
Building works. Code enforcement.
Oh, well, Public Works is not, anyway. Why not?
He works with the public.
Community, well, code, whatever,
Many hats.
Thanks, it's been a busy week.
sounds like it.
I heard this afternoon back from Jeff Anderson in Northern Hydrology. He's received our contract. He's obviously going to sign it and send one of them back, and he's already working on the project. And
Just for the
the
information.
comments he's made is that he's already seeing some issues.
With the flood.
Did we get any feedback from FEMA as to whether they're gonna honor some sort of an extension to that 90-day deadline?
Yeah, we did, and it's not positive. We said no extensions, but, you know, I've heard that, and I've talked with other community planning directors, and they've said, we've been through this, and, you know, we just keep pushing, and they keep playing, so.
Okay,
I think we've already established that we're going to appeal these, and we're in the process now, so I think it'd be hard for them to shut the door in our face.
okay,
We'll probably have a special meeting if we had to.
thank you. Go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Just saying we could potentially have a special meeting if we had to like get something on the record to them before the 90 days.
Yeah, and I think.
Well, we sent them a letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jeff's well aware of the October 4th deadline. He expects by the end of September to have information for us. So, and part of the contract is for him to assist us in preparing the appeal letter to FEMA. So and I say we've worked with Jeff quite a bit
Right.
on the wastewater treatment plant, so he's familiar with the community, and he's got an affection for the community too, so he's digging in. So.
And I just wanted to clarify on the contract, it was under $10,000. We did an informal bidding, and I had a couple of people that were going to respond. And so I went ahead and signed the contract to get that going.
Yeah, we needed to get after that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry it took so long, it was just
Well, it was
back and forth.
we didn't push it.
Code enforcement. I want to reiterate what Adrian said. Public Works crew was great, and at the drop of a hat, they picked up and came over and supported me and worked their butts off. And I also want to thank Willits PD, the chief, Sergeant Donahue, a couple of the officers were out there to protect me and make sure I was safe in the process of serving the warrants today. And to be honest with you, it turned out to be way more than I thought it would be. We eradicated approximately 200 plants, and literally a mounded load in the dump trailer. So I think that's significant, and hopefully we'll get the message out to people that outdoor commercial grows in Willits are not going to be tolerated. So.
Did that go through a whole process of going to the court to get or was it just
We went before the
straightforward?
judge twice to get the warrant we needed to get the
Okay.
plants.
But I think it is really important, as Adrian reminded, I just had someone the other day say, oh, well, so the Mendocino counties, the Board of Supervisors policies on cannabis, apply to you, and I said, no.
This isn't their jurisdiction.
We are our own city within, and, that was a fairly knowledgeable person, so I think it's good to remind people that we have our own policies.
You know, I'm not sure that there was any misunderstanding in this case, but
Hard to misunderstand.
we'll give the
200
benefit of the
yeah.
doubt for right now. Okay. One comment about Public Works, because we don't have any representative there, but I'm so happy with Bill Wilson. It's something that's needed to be done for all of the time I've been in Willits, is getting done. They're cleaning and repainting the trim on the outside of these windows, and they've pressure washed the front of City Hall, and personally, I got a lot more pride in the place when it looks good than I do when it looks like we've neglected it, so I'm happy to see that. Building department, I just did a final inspection on one new house today and issued a building permit for another new house today. So there's lots of remodeling going on, mostly residential remodeling. I haven't had any approach for any large commercial work, but we are staying busy.
Good. Thanks, John. So we don't have anybody here from Public Works or Engineering. Do you have anything you wanted to add into that?
Not any more than I already reported
Yeah,
out on.
right. Let's go on to committee reports. MCOG?
MCOG met last Monday, and we did the following things. Approved the transportation plan, overall work plan for MCOG, and raised it from 1564 to 1777, a $212,724 increase in the transportation overall grant. Accepted the 2014-15 transit audit was received and okayed by MCOG. The Greater Ukiah representative, and it was kind of interesting, one of the members on MCOG is against the Costco building at the south end of town, and said that it would be better if they went with solar panels on the top of the building. That would make it better. And it was rejected, and they didn't say whether it was rejected by the city or by Costco. And so to make up for that, they're going to use all electric mowers and hedge trimmers and this type of thing instead of the power. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought, you know, that doesn't all say each other, but that's...
They're just going to sell electric hedge
Yeah.
trimmers, no
Right.
gas hedge trimmers?
No, just, you can't power up, you just have to electric cord it, I guess is what it is.
So which board member?
Stemmerini, is that the way to say it, Adrian?
Where's the
Scalmanini?
Scalini, yes.
Scalmanini.
Yeah.
Scalini. Oh, okay. The city.
One of those Irish guys that,
Yeah, that's pretty Irish.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. LAFCO,
Did not meet?
MTA,
MTA met on last Wednesday, the 17th, and we had a regular board meeting, and we also had a retreat format to kind of strategize for where we're headed in the future. But some of the interesting things that came up, one of them is that the share space, that's kind of a co-work facility, is going to have an open house on September 15th.
This is EDSC.
Oh, I'm
Not
sorry,
MTA.
that's right, MTA, I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, put the other hat on. MTA is meeting tomorrow.
okay.
Sorry.
Get back to
I
that
just didn't
report.
want you to- yeah.
We'll probably get to that report here in a couple
Yes.
minutes. MSWA,
Our MSWA met, and there's a few little things that, that happened. One of them is solid waste is paying a surcharge that amounts to about $11,000 a year to MSWA. And the surcharge is being calculated on the waste that comes into the transfer station. But what happens is the solid waste separates out the recyclables, and what actually gets to the landfill is considerably less. And they appealed to not have to pay that surcharge on recyclables. And one of the reasons, of course, is that it's an incentive for them to go through the trash. It costs them money. So we approved that. And the other little piece of information is that the general manager, Mike Sweeney, as he puts it, is going to be on an airplane on November 4th. He is retired from MSWA. And the board interviewed, there were 7 applicants. The call went out about a month, 2 months ago, and 7 applicants applied and was winnowed down to 3 finalists. And the board chose 1 finalist, and I was just notified that that individual did accept the offer. And I'm not at liberty to reveal the name of the winner because this individual is still working, and their agency that would like for them to wait until they start the new job before it's public knowledge. So stay tuned. The mystery will deepen.
All right. League of California Cities.
Yeah. I went up on Friday to Arcata.
Thank you for doing that.
Well, certainly, I always love driving to Arcata. It was interesting, in light of Dusty's report on the housing element, the speakers were 4 speakers from Arcata, from Eureka, and from a couple of housing agencies, one of them from the government. They were talking about dealing with homelessness and how each one of them is doing it. And one jurisdiction, I forgot to bring my notes with me, so I'm going from memory. One jurisdiction, one of the companies was a small house company, but it wasn't tiny houses; it was tiny shacks. It was very simple. It was like one step down from tiny houses, but they're habitable. But nothing fancy, just plain. And they erect them in empty lots and places, and they make streets and things like that, and it's been kind of successful. The tenants have to pay a monthly fee, below market value, and they get to say what goes on, in their community, and that's been pretty successful. The city of Eureka opted for something a little different because their land is kind of landlocked, and they have a lot of marshland and stuff around them, so they really can't expand. So instead of going out, they go up. And he's pushing for high-rise buildings, which sort of makes me cringe a little bit thinking about Chicago and New York and stuff like that. But anyway, they seem to be doing fine. The underlying common denominator for all of these things is that they find that it works if you can keep the number of tenants down below 30. Is a controllable number. They have an on-site manager who's there, so there's somebody to talk to. They don't have to go down to some agency office if they have something to complain about. And the tenants are part of the bureaucracy, so to speak. And so far, they've had good results. So it was an interesting conversation.
All right, thank you. Finance has not met. Caltrans relinquishment ad hoc committee did meet. Holly, do you want to go on that, or you want to, or have Adrian?
We met, we don't have any decision-making points to bring to the city council, but one of the things, we met with Caltrans Tuesday, I think it was, and everyone at the table had received our design contributions from the consultant, and provided that to them. And there were some new people that we hadn't met before, the Caltrans landscaping team, and they were all really complimentary of the plan that we had come up with. They were like, you guys have done a lot of hard work. And of course, pretty much everyone in Caltrans is concerned about timing and when everything is going to happen. but we're trying to make sure that, you know, the city gets the best deal, and Caltrans is trying to make sure that they keep on their timeline. So there is certainly more to come.
Well, to the point, I think, you know, we did try to make strenuously our case that a state of good repair in 2016 is a complete street project, not a 1950 or 30 or whatever you want to call that. And we have some growing support at that table to do that. And, you know, they are, you know, they have rejected that idea out of hand up until now in any previous meetings, or all of the previous meetings that we bring this up. And this time, they, you know, I think with the background that Dusty was able to provide, that this is the standard, these are Caltrans standards for streets these days, and some of those efforts, they are made a commitment to go back to legal and find out what they can do in terms of some of these. You know, it certainly isn't going to put in theme lights or something like that, but it does, you know, in their complete street design, it does have a, you know, I mean, you learn a lot in a hurry when you don't know anything. But in that complete street design, lights are, there's a whole formula and, you know, a whole Bible of lighting on a complete street, you know, for intersection lights and the lumens and how much area they take up and stuff. So it's not that is a component of a complete street, and conceivably having lights like we do 150 feet apart and 70 feet in the air or whatever they are. So anyway, we felt, I think, somewhat encouraged, didn't we, Adrian, that we're making some progress on that point. I think our charge is to have another run at our proposal or
Right.
our deal and refine the
And really
last.
prioritize, yeah.
You know, finalize our, understanding of what that design is. So
This
they,
is what we want, yeah.
and then that it is they were happy that it was in a format that was based on Caltrans maps, and I think Dusty did that. Did we find the CAD stuff and forward that?
Yeah, we did, and that's been sent to the.
Okay, so they actually have that in a, you know, in the format that they use to design with, and it's overlaid on their map. So anyway, Rod's got some information on sewer laterals and stuff that, you know, the devil's in the details, but I think we're making a little bit of progress. I wouldn't say it's grand, but, you know, there's a little bit of. Oh, and then let me just add, Larry, before I forget, because the other is that they are also seem to be looking at the 17-18 construction season, and right now let me back up. They're looking at the 17-18 next summer, next year, doing, correct me if I get this wrong, partners, of doing the school project, the sidewalk in front of the school and the pavement to the city limits, which starts
That's
a
gonna be
little
first.
bit north of the present Sherwood Road interchange. And then the following season, which would be the 2018, they're thinking they're going to do the rest of it, which is Sherwood Road and the downtown, you know, sidewalks and streets. And
They're talking about bidding it together so they could get a better price.
Hmm.
And, you know, for the community, they are saying that they plan to do it a block at a time. Holly asked if that's both sides of the street simultaneous or whatever, but they didn't know that. But the impact to any business, they would expect to be able to do those blocks in a 3-week period. And they have to allow access daily, ramps and access. I mean, obviously, they take this on-street parking away. They totally rip out the sidewalk, curb, and gutter. They just daylight it, and they do a block at a time. They just bomb it, take all that out, and then they have to put in temporary access to the businesses, and then the sidewalk becomes, or the walking area becomes, I guess, where you would be presently parked, the parking area. They cone that off. And then,
There's a 3-week
so
limit.
they would not be impacting businesses for more than 3 weeks. And they think it's somewhat less than that. They say that the project would go to bid in May, and I think
2018.
in 2018, and it would start in the beginning of the summer season.
I think it's going to go to bid next year for the following year construction season.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think they've already,
So, anyway,
the school's gonna happen first. Yeah.
the new report on that is that it's looking like maybe they really want to get the whole thing done. And, previously when we talked to them, had really put the Sherwood Road thing on almost an indefinite hold, saying they needed another funding cycle. Now they seem to have brought it back to do it in a one project.
And if I could just add one other thing, they did show us an inventory, so based on our plan, they did an inventory of like, there's this many lights and this many, tree wells, and, they went down the block. And the reason why they want the prioritization from us is that, like, lights, for example, was 99 lights. And we've had some conversations with some of the members of the audience and in the community, like, maybe we could not do that many lights, so we need to kind of decide what we want to see out there.
I think it was actually 99 total enhancements, lights.
Oh, I thought it was 99
ballards.
lights.
No,
No.
it's 99 lights.
It was 99
It was
lights,
99
yeah.
lights?
So I was
Oh,
saying,
okay.
yeah, we may not
Yeah.
actually, if we want to get the most bang for our buck, we might want to reduce that and just do every other, we could potentially have.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's kind of, we made a little progress. We made a commitment to 30 days from now, something towards the end of September, and we need to get our design finalized here so that
Yeah.
we're giving them
So that will be
Pretty
on
clean
the
product.
September 14th agenda.
okay?
I have one question also. Does this, oh,
Sorry, yeah.
I think he's next to Metal.
My question is, and so they're going to start approximately at the high school and Sherwood and work themselves south?
No, the next season, Larry, the year from.
I understand that, I'm
Oh,
just
they're
saying.
going to go north. They're going to start
At
at,
20?
no, at Sherwood Road, the north side of Sherwood Road, put in the sidewalk, curb and gutter,
Okay,
to the.
Next summer.
that's
in the
next year,
schools
I understand.
next year.
Yeah.
And then the following year, they didn't really say where they would start.
Okay.
And they may work in multiple areas at
Yeah.
one time.
Okay, and then my next thing was, are they still gonna put water in front of the,
Well, that's what we, that is, they're willing to do what we ask them to do. We're gonna be
Limits.
suggesting that that's part of the complete streets thing, and they need to do that at their expense. We'll see how that goes.
Okay, and one other question about what's included is that it was brought up at EDFC that we're trying to get fiber instead of, so is that also putting in conduit, so we have, yes,
Yes.
that is included, okay, good.
I would like to just emphasize that, we emphasize to them regarding next year's project in front of the high school, that they need to work within the summer months and not impact the school year.
They recognize that,
Does it
clearly,
happen?
so
Like
that
start in
project
August?
would start the week school's out and try and be completed before school starts. So do we have anything from EDFC? You started.
Yeah, I started,
Yeah.
okay, first I just want a little addendum on MTA, and that is that the meeting tomorrow at 1:30 is here in Willits, in our conference room, I believe. So if any Willits people want to weigh in on unmet transit needs, this would be a perfect time to do it. It's right here at City Hall tomorrow at 1:30. So now, EDFC. A couple things came up at our meeting, which included that the meat facility has kind of been completely put on the back burner, primarily because local ranchers really haven't bought in and made a commitment that they want to participate. So it just, it's on the back burner. There are some inquiries about biomass. There are a few applicants coming forward to do some kind of biomass project. And the other one is the Ukiah Share Space, which is a co-work facility located in the building that's sort of opposite the Methodist Church in Ukiah, is going to have an open house on September 15th, and there have been a fair number of people showing interest in that, and that will help sort of incubate new businesses, basically. It's people that don't want to have their own separate facility and separate internet and phone and all that stuff. They can use a common space and have a place to work. And also it really kind of helps them talk to each other, learn how to do the bookkeeping or whatever. So those were the kind of business items. And then we had a long sort of priority and strategy session talking about where all of the 21 board members of EDFC see us putting our emphasis as we go forward. And I think there was a lot of really great ideas. And there will be a small committee to come up with a kind of strategy document.
Where the biomass is going to tentatively going to be?
I don't think they have that, they haven't gone that far yet, but there was a pilot project. We're up in Usal and kind of mostly north of here. But the idea of those is that they can not only reduce the fire hazard in some of the forest areas, but then make that into a useful product such as kind of fertilizer and stuff like that. It's not so much, it's not about generating electricity, it's about just turning wood waste into a useful soil supplement.
They have one at the Harwood Mill right now. It's out on their slab.
Was that right?
Yeah, I don't have all the details on that, I'm sorry.
Can I add something about EDFC?
You bet.
The following day after your strategic planning session, John Curry and Jesse Barnett, who's their vice president, came up here and met with myself, Linda Roofing, and one of her staff, and representatives from the city of Ukiah and the county to talk about where EDFC started when they were first established and what are they doing now. So that's going to be an ongoing dialogue. I just wanted to make you aware of that.
So,
So
how's the
this-
railroad doing?
Yeah, so I think they haven't met since we met last, but I did just want to report out briefly, not on NCRA, but on the skunk train. Larry and I went and had a conversation with Fort Bragg City Council members and Dan Jurdy with the Board of Supervisors. And the reason this has been brought up is because the skunk train is trying to figure out a sustainable way to fix their tunnel. And us being on one end of the line, we're part of that conversation. So it sounds like they're interested in presenting to the full council in September. And they've sort of narrowed down on a strategy. They were talking about a JPA and whether or not that could work, or a nonprofit. The nonprofit idea didn't seem to fly. Both cities, Willits and Fort Bragg, are both very clear that we don't have money to contribute, that we want the skunk train to succeed, but at least on the city's behalf, we have a number of other pretty major priorities. But we also want them to be part of the community, so I think we're happy to hear about what their ideas are.
Okay. So item 11, coming back around, is a discussion and possible direction to staff to to develop a comprehensive marijuana policy and ordinance for the city of Willits. Adrian, what's up with that?
This is actually Vice Mayor Ornstein's item.
Thank you. Okay. This was coming, as we all knew, and it was pushed forward a little bit by a visit that was made to the facility on East Hill Road, which a lot of people felt that it was time we actually need to address this issue. So I want to give a little background just to bring everybody up to speed, just for the public as well. And some of it, I'm sure many people know, but just to put everything into context. Marijuana has been in this community, in this county, for a number of years. In 1996, Prop 215 decriminalized medical marijuana in California. In 2000, Measure G was introduced in the county that would decriminalize recreational marijuana in the county, and it was passed by about 58%. In 2007, I believe the first marijuana ordinance in the county was passed by the city of Willits. And as a subnote, to let everybody know, where I'm coming from personally, I was the one who introduced this thing. And the ordinance is still in place, and basically it bans outdoor grows and a limit of 6 plants, only indoor in secured buildings with no odor emissions, and dispensaries were never permitted. And that's on the city's ordinance. That still stands. And then in 2008, Measure B was passed that rescinded Measure G, that decriminalized recreational marijuana, and that passed by 52%. So the number is 58% to pass it, 52% to rescind it. Tells me, and you could argue with this, that we're pretty evenly divided in the county about marijuana. Recently, the DEA renewed the listing of marijuana as a Schedule I drug, and in case there's a misunderstanding about what a Schedule I drug is defined as a drug with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. And so marijuana is still listed by the DEA. However, the DEA authorized that more marijuana would be grown under their supervision in order to provide enough marijuana for expanding research. I guess it was about last year, an investment group bought the old AM&D building on East Hill Road. And at the time, we were told that they were going to bring in a 3D printing company, and that never happened. As it later developed, we learned that indeed they were looking to develop an indoor marijuana growing operation. I believe city staff visited on several occasions to see what was going on. And probably about a month ago, I think, city council members and city staff visited, took a tour of that separately, 2 at a time, so we didn't violate any Brown Act, to see what was going on. And what was going on is that the building is about a 44,000 square foot building, and it had been subdivided into a number of what would become grow rooms. And I estimate the grow rooms were 25 feet by 25 feet, something on that order.
No, they're much larger.
Okay, whatever, they're...
I think they're conveniently just under 3,000 feet, because that is in under some
Oh, yeah, the
state law,
California
it
state,
can't
yeah.
be more than 3,000 square feet. So their size is not coincidental.
Okay. One of the rooms had been outfitted as a grow room. There were lights on the ceiling. There were many fans, floor fans that were set up around the room, and there were a number of carbon filtration systems that were also placed around the room. And he turned on everything. I almost went blind. But the air was really moving very nicely. Obviously, there was no marijuana in place to get a sense of how clean it was, but, you know, on a matter of faith, the filtration system would remove all of the odors. And the rooms were perfectly sealed. The building was sealed, and there was no venting to the outside. So the premise was that nothing that goes on inside the building would be detected outside the building. And that sits right there. He's already invested quite a bit of money in this thing, and he was looking to, I believe he told me something like up to $2 million when he's finished with it. Now, over the years, the city council and various committees we've discussed this in open session many times, and many people have had the opportunity to come and testify and give us their feelings. And I have personally spoken to many people around town on the streets from all walks of life, from law enforcement, medical, teachers. We receive letters, and I think this is true of every council member here, that we've all been in contact with everybody who has a position on this thing. Now, what I have gleaned from this, and you know, you may agree or disagree or add to it or subtract or whatever, but I have gleaned the arguments down to two very simple facts or common denominators from the for people and for the against people. And for the people who are against marijuana, the one prevailing argument is it should not be available to children or other people who shouldn't be getting it, just like alcohol and tobacco. And the other argument, the common argument, was neighbors shouldn't be subjected to the negative impacts. And the negative impacts, as we know, you know, range from the odor, armed guards in the backyards, guard dogs, trimmigrants wandering around in our streets, things like that. So those were the two concerns, common concerns that I heard repeated over and over again with some variations. On the for side, the pro-marijuana people, their arguments came down to patients need easy access to their medicine. And if we ban dispensaries in town, it makes it very difficult. To counter that argument, though, the county is working towards permitting dispensaries and all other kinds of access, so that just by merely driving, you know, a couple of blocks outside of the city limits, the patients can get what they need. So it's not like they're being denied access to their medicine if we ban it in the city. And the other argument in favor of marijuana is there's a potential for a boost to the local economy, jobs, tax, that sort of thing. Now, as I see it, as we address this issue, the council has three options, maybe more, but I'm seeing three. The first option, and this is not an order of preference or priority, the first option is to place a total ban on marijuana, total. Enforcement procedures would be required, and the cost of that enforcement would come out of the city's general fund. The second option, as I see it, is the opposite side, is permit marijuana activities with no restrictions. Anything can happen, whatever you want. And of course, in that case, there would presumably be some revenue from taxes or fees or whatever. So now we're seeing some sort of a cash flow, but it's like the Wild West in that scenario. The third option would be somewhere in the middle, which would be to permit limited marijuana activities with tight controls. And in that case, the cost of enforcement would be covered with by fees or taxes that we would collect. So I'm making an assumption that option 3 is the most viable option. And under that option, there would have to be certain rules. And I'm just going to read off a few that I just came up with, but obviously this would have to be something that would be subject to a lot of discussion by a lot of people to really nail them down, because there's a lot of details to be worked out. But just right off the bat, there would be no retail outlets in the city, no dispensaries, no head shops, none of that stuff that people can come in and buy marijuana in the city. Marijuana activities would only be located in industrial areas, and speaking with other people, like in Arcata, for example, and we'll see this in a little while, that's what they do. And most other jurisdictions that do have marijuana activities, they do it in industrial areas that are located away from residential areas and schools and things like that. The number of permitted facilities would be strictly limited, and there would be fees or taxes levied on the operation. Now, I was curious to see what areas we do have available that could be suitable, and a Willits zoning map has been distributed, so everybody can kind of follow that. And I also have we were also distributed a zoning map from Arcata, and to supplement that one, I had this other one that more clearly identifies the different areas that they've done for marijuana. And essentially, this area on this one that I just handed out
This is Arcata.
is this one, yeah. This one here is Arcata. You have this medical marijuana innovation zone, and I was trying to locate where it is on this big zoning map that we have, and it looks to me like it's up in the northeast corner. It's kind of a purple sort of thingy, and then it gets into pink and other purple. You see that on the right-hand side? It's located here.
Yeah, industrial general
Yeah.
and industrial limited.
Now, the significant thing about...
Both pink and purple would be...
Well, it looks, if you look at this map here and compare it to this map,
Right.
you'll see, you know, how the area, how it's covered. You see, just look at the shape. And it goes all the way up to that little piece that sort of curves around to the right. The significance of this map and of the Willits zoning map is, I found it to be pretty stark, because in Arcata, they have this huge area, and I'm not really sure exactly how big it is, but you can see it looks pretty big. There's a lot of lots on it, and it's remote. It's at the northeast corner of their town, out of the way of everything. In Willits, we have maybe 3 or 4 good-sized plants, and some of them are located in places that we can't really put this kind of operation. There's a couple of, and I'm thinking, you know, staff would verify or, you know, deny or contradict if I'm wrong, but there's some empty lots located near the sewer plant, and there's a bunch of empty lots over by waste treatment facility, the solid waste facility, which is close to the Blosser Lane Elementary School. So there's problems with all these things. There's not a lot of spots in this town. And then there's one other thing that would also need to be considered, are the city resources. Water, sewer, police coverage, that sort of thing. And it seems like, and Dusty could probably say if I'm correct or not, but it seems to me that if we would permit a sizable marijuana grow operation in the town, it might trigger an EIR or something like that, just to make sure we have enough water, enough sewer coverage, you know, whatever, impacts on neighborhoods, things like that. So that's kind of a quick synopsis, and what my recommendation would be is that we have a discussion here. There's a lot of stuff that would need to be discussed. I mean, if the council votes to go for a total ban, then that, you know, that kind of ends the conversation right there, I think, except for some details. If the council decides that we should have some kind of marijuana activity in this town, then I believe it would require an ad hoc committee that's going to spend a little bit of time going into a lot of details. As you can imagine, there's a lot of stuff to cover. And that's my report.
Any comments?
Yeah, I'll comment. I also looked at the city of Willits and heavy industrial areas that could take any of these things, and I am willing to, you know, to listen to what we have to say. The one that's all set up on Bechtel and East Valley.
East Hill.
East Hill is pretty much isolated, I mean, as far as the fence and this type of thing. The thing that concerned me more than anything was the amount of water. So I looked at and asked the staff to come up with anybody that used over 5,000 gallons a day. And because that seems like a lot of water to me, but obviously it's not. We have some over 40 different entities in our community that uses over 5,000 gallons a day. And the city of Willits is a pretty big contender in that bunch. The other thing that bothered me was, and Jim Lance can probably answer this, if this started and we went along with it and it didn't work out to the way that they said that it was going to work out, can we just pull the permit and stop it at that particular moment?
You know, that's an interesting question and discussion, because once you permit something and someone relies on their permit and they invest money in it, they've got what they consider to be a vested right to continue, and they've relied on the issuance of this permit. However, I would think that any kind of a program that we would develop has got to have some enforcement mechanisms, some teeth behind it, so if there are violations, you know, they can be addressed.
Well, let me add to that as well. In the packet, we have 3 documents from the city of Arcata, and one of them is the ordinance. And it was very interesting to read through it because it answered your questions completely. I mean...
But that was for Humboldt County, and I was wondering about if Mendocino County is the same.
Well, we're not concerned with Mendocino County. We're the city. We have our own independent...
I understand it, but well, never mind. That's one of my questions.
Well, I mean, the point is that in their city ordinance, the city of Arcata's ordinance, they clearly specify that a license is granted and it can be pulled for violation. It can be either suspended or taken away completely.
A license might be pulled, but you're not going to pull a zoning, the next person. So I run an asphalt plant in Willits, and it says it's got to have 0 VOC emissions. And you come over and put your VOC gun on it, and I've got emissions, you take away my permit.
Right.
Doesn't mean that Holly goes tomorrow and she can put in a asphalt plant there, and if she doesn't do emissions, then everybody,
Once the ordinance is in place,
it's a difference between a zoning issue and a permit issue.
I understand, but the ultimate bottom line of the whole thing is to prevent any kind of a negative impact on the community. So if Holly is careful enough to run her asphalt plant, and all the emissions stay inside the building, and nobody knows what's going on inside the building, then it seems to me that the city wouldn't have any objections to that.
Well, that's not Larry's question, though. The question is that if you designate property as being appropriately zoned for a use, and you give a permit to operate that in that zone classification, that the subsequent owner, zoning goes with the property, not with the
Yeah,
owner.
of course.
So you cannot withdraw, if you allow commercial marijuana cultivation in this community based on a zoning ordinance, you cannot, I think you have a very near to impossible job of trying to backtrack it unless the feds come along and throw you in jail for defying the state constitution of the United States and passing laws that are contrary to federal law.
But we're not talking about.
Which you are doing, but, then I think that would be the method of rescinding it.
See, we're not talking about changing or withdrawing the zoning. We're talking about the operator who's operating legally in that zone, who is violating the ordinance
Right.
while he's operating it.
That's not
So
Larry's question, though.
I thought it was.
That's what it was.
Okay.
So, no, Larry, I thought your question is that if the commercial cultivation of marijuana in the community did not turn out to be a benefit to the community, in your view, could we remove it?
My question is that if I drive down past the building and I can smell it, then it's a violation of, if that's one of our stipulations.
Yeah.
That is, do we have any teeth that says, you have to stop it, or you have 20 days to get it under control, or, I mean, these are things that this group, if we decide to go with this, that we need to work out and have ironclad and have the owner of the business understand this.
Well, I can tell you in that regard, we've had that situation in this town for 20 years of a business emanating odors, and it's not approved by the permit, and it has been emanating odors since day one. So in practicality, the answer is no.
Okay, but I'm still not convinced of that. My convinced is that we make it so that that is one of the stipulations. And if the council votes to go with this, and I'm not going with a slug of them, I'm going to go with one and see how it works for the city. And, I'll be very, very truthful. I've had a whole batch of real sleepless nights over this. And it hasn't come easy with me, and I've talked to people on both sides. I've talked to a lot of individuals that are for and against and all of these things. And I guess the thing that goes for me is that I have to put my opinion of it on the back burner and see what I think is best for the community. And I think that we need a whole lot of things done in the community that I don't see anything happening money-wise to raise the revenue of the community so that we can do the $300,000 worth of stuff that we cut out of the budget this time to start doing it. And we have leaky valves at the water plant, and chug holes, and all, just a number of things, and we don't have the money to do these. And we're going to have to come up with something to be able to have the revenue to do it. And I just think that we're going to have to look at this and really look at it right and work it out and see if we can come up with something that will work for us as a community.
Well, just for a reference point, I mean, I took your zoning map that was designed, and I just marked out that the heavy industrial zone in there, and it may not be half, but it's probably a good solid third of the city limits in the city of Willits is ML or MH. So I think if you can't just have one. It's like saying we only want one McDonald's in town, or we only want one hardware store. We're only going to permit one. Because we don't want that, we only want one jewelry store in town. You can't do that. That's a restraining trade.
Just one jewelry store?
Yeah, I get it. But you can't do that. I mean, that
That's discriminatory.
that's discriminatory. You can't do it.
All right.
And you can say, we're going to allow it on heavy industrial, and it looks to me like you've opened up a third to 50% of the real estate in town is designated as in that zone.
But part
You
of the-
can cap, you can say that you're only gonna allow 6 permits.
Or
That is-
one.
Wait.
I don't think so. I think that's where you can do that, but then Jim's going to be defending the guy that wants number 7.
Yeah, but
Against the
Don't
guy that
some
wants
communities
number
have a lottery or something so
It is done.
competing proposed business operations participate in the lottery and win the right to.
Try and do that to Costco and see how well it works.
well, part of the problem.
Go
Can
ahead.
I take a turn,
Go
please?
ahead, go ahead.
So I just want to respond, I thank Ron for taking this on and coming up with some background and some good analysis that gives us a place to start from. So I appreciate that very much. And I want to respond to the 3 choices that he set out. I do not favor a total ban. I think we are, well into the 21st century, and I think it's time to sort of look at the facts about this community and also about the reason that marijuana was put on the Schedule 1 to begin with. I think it's inappropriate to just, we're going to withdraw from that entire thing. So I'm not in favor of a complete ban. I'm also not in favor of free-for-all, no restrictions. I really appreciate but I think there's a lot of room in the gray area between there, and there's a couple things that I think are important. One is that I think any commercial marijuana, in addition to the regulations that we would want to have written in, would not be permitted by right. It would be a conditional use. We should add things that are like how far it is from residential zones, how far it is from schools, so that we don't open the door completely wide to all industrial uses, and that it also be a conditional use, and would have to meet concerns about appropriate water use and police protection and all that, and that there should be definite sanctions if the conditions are not met, such as emission of odors and things of that sort, so that anybody who does go through that whole process, meets all those concerns to begin with, and goes into operation, is still accountable for meeting all those conditions. So I liked a lot of the things that you said, Ron, but I don't think it should be allowed by right, so that we know that the location and that the permitting conditions for any such approval are appropriate to that particular site. The one thing in what your report that I personally disagree with, but I think we might have more support on the council for a position that Ron is arguing for instead of what but I don't really completely agree with the idea that by not having any dispensary in town, we've somehow kept it from the hands of youth or whatever. Dispensaries would be very heavily regulated, just as the way alcohol dispensaries are. If you're going to have a bar in town or people that are selling alcohol, they have to check to make sure that their customers are 21 years or older, and if they don't, they're in a lot of trouble. And I think dispensaries have to be, if we have them, have to be similarly very accountable. And it's interesting that in Colorado, apparently, and I haven't looked up all the statistics, but use of marijuana among the youth, among the non-adults in Colorado has actually gone down since they legalized it. And I have a feeling that there is a certain amount of attraction for what's illegal or for what is being forbidden, that youth tend to go, wow, they won't let me do that. Hey, I'll show them. So I think actually by making this more of a accountable and reasonable regulation available only to adults and only with medical permits, that we might actually find that it is a better situation for not having the vulnerable youth violate that policy. So I actually, and I also do think that medical usage of marijuana is a very legitimate thing. And I think as the federal government finally starts to look at that more seriously, there are hundreds of studies and thousands of anecdotal stories of people who have been just incredibly benefited by medical marijuana. So I think given that, and given that any dispensary would have to meet a lot of a very high standard of not abusing that I would just go the next step and say dispensaries would be treated the same way an industrial, indoor, regulated operation could be treated, that again, it would have to meet all the standards. So that's the one place where I disagree with Ron's, where he comes down in that gray area. But I also realize that there may not be support on council for that.
Did you have something you wanted?
I was just going to say just a couple things.
Before I jump in.
Just sort of where I'm at, and I'd be interested to hear if there is anyone from the public. Larry, can I see yours? Very colored, it helps.
No, I want to do that.
You can also look, so MH is noticed up on that board. There it is. It is kind of harder to see, but this is sort of what we're talking about. I find myself kind of in the middle. I'm supportive of not having it in residential. I mean, as you can see from the 200 plants cut down, I can almost touch my neighbor's house when I stick out my arm, and I don't think it's reasonable to have that type of intensive growing in a city limits situation where residences are so close together as we are, and it really creates neighbor conflicts, and I'm very supportive of that policy. As far as the commercial growing, I would support it in industrially zoned areas. I would support a cap on the number of permits that would be allowed. I would think it'd be good to have more than one, because it's good to have competition. If we had one company that employed lots of people, and we wouldn't want to just have all of our eggs in one basket as far as economically. I think it would be good to have others. I am also really thinking, though, about burden on staff. So it's been recommended to me that if we came up with an ordinance, if there was support to do that, that we keep it fairly simple. There's absolutely details that need to be done, but if we had a square footage fee, annual fee that was collected, then, I don't want to have our PD or code enforcement going in and counting numbers of plants and things like that. I think that potentially
$1,000 a square foot?
Well, we would have to come up with the square footage price. I'm guessing it would be less than that, but I know that this.
Why would you make it less than that?
Because I also want it to be used. I mean, we have industrial buildings that are sitting vacant, and the fact that those are getting brought up to code and construction, I think, is a really positive thing. I mean, I did ask the person on East Hill, what are you going to do if the city denies this and we continue to, because the bonus for us is that they have a really nice facility. I mean, they have invested a lot of money into the sprinkler systems and things like that. And he said that he would basically try to come up with some other sort of agricultural, indoor agricultural growing of some sort, not
Hashish.
cannabis.
Hashish.
But I just want to say that I am supportive of limiting the intricacies of the oversight that needs to happen, that we make sure that it's safe, that fees are paid, that it's not negatively impacting the neighbors, but I also know that many taxes, will be, if it's legalized recreationally, there's a taxing structure that will go into effect that will not be handled by us, as far as the state government and things like that. So, Water Quality Control Board, they're doing a lot of stuff on what water releases are allowed and things like that. And I think we could certainly look to a lot of other agencies to do some of the enforcement, not the enforcement of the city limits, but regulations. So generally, I would be supportive of that. I don't think that this is going to be a magic bullet for our budget. I never have. I mean, I think that it would help. I agree with Larry that it would be really nice to, have some income coming in from other sources, and if we could keep it in the areas that we want to have it, I think that would be a positive thing. I do think that there is a limited moment to be getting income from this. I think that as it's legalized statewide, our premium that people get from being from Mendocino County is going to go down. I mean, if you can suddenly get warehouse space in Chico or all over, it's necessarily going to decrease in value. So I think that for a few years we could maybe get a decent amount of income on this. The investor who's invested in the property thinks that it will go much longer than that. He thinks that he will be able to get value on that property for years and years to come. But I'm a little more skeptical to see how it goes. But I think the benefit that we would get recognition-wise from banning it altogether, we maybe would get a news cycle of, this little town in Northern California doesn't want to do it. I don't think that impact will last, long term. So, I mean, I frankly am thinking about the economics of our community and the fact that this opportunity is not going to be forever. I think it is going to be a limited duration kind of thing.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to respond to some of the comments that were made. First of all, when we do look at the Willits zoning map, it is true that I'll accept a third of the landmass is industrially zoned, but I took a ride around town to see exactly where they're all located, and there's only a few of them, in my estimation, that are remote enough that I feel would fit in with this. And actually, if you all remember, years ago when the zoning was set up in this town, it was developed so that the industrial zones are intermixed with the residential neighborhoods. And the whole idea was so that people working in the factories can walk to work.
That wasn't it at all.
Well, whatever the reason was, that's the effect. And I mean, if you go down one street, for example, I forget which, Monroe, I believe, you have where the glass company, Roundtree Glass, is right smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And in fact, when they built a new building, there were some complaints from the neighbor that she was being overshadowed and, dwarfed by the building. So I think we would have to take a ride around town with our staff who are more familiar with all the neighborhoods, and I'm guessing that we're going to find that there really aren't a lot of suitable spots in this town. As far as the dispensaries are concerned, the reason I put that in was in response to a lot of the comments that I received from many people whose biggest concern with marijuana is that the kids can get a hold of it. And you're right, that they can get a hold of it, whether we have dispensaries in town. Anybody can buy as much marijuana as they want with or without dispensaries. But I see this as a perception thing. that if we were to license retail outlets, whether dispensaries or if they're, you know, drugstores, it's a perception that the city is enabling and empowering the sale of marijuana in our town. So I put that in there just to sort of hopefully satisfy some of those people, and I'm not sure if it would or not anyway. The other thing is that, you know, I pointed out that I was the one in 2000, actually 5 or 6 or something, who initiated the marijuana ordinance in town. And the reason I did that was because our next door neighbor was growing marijuana right across the fence, and it was terrible. It was pretty bad. And at that time, some of you may remember, this is in the period after this Measure G came into effect, and there was pretty much a welcome sign on our city limits saying, come on to Mendocino County. They love marijuana here, and everybody came here from around the country and from around the world to grow pot. At that time, there were very few people who were willing to stand up and complain about it in public. They would complain in private, and I sure heard a lot about it, and I complained a lot, but everybody was afraid to stand up and say something, and I believe it was because they were a little intimidated. They were afraid of retaliation. After the city passed this ordinance, in fact, I remember vividly the night that we discussed the ordinance, that we debated the thing, we had the room full of people who came out of the woodwork, literally, people who were dead set against this, and they complained. They stood up there and they complained about how marijuana affects them and this and that. And it seemed like after that moment, the tide turned. And if we look at the history of marijuana in this county, that was culminated with this 2008 Measure B, things started to turn. People weren't afraid of speaking anymore, speaking out, and now we're right now at a sort of a balance point. You know, we went one way and then we went the other way, and I think we're at a sort of a balance point. But I mean, the reason I'm focusing on that is that I want to make it very clear that I am not a big fan of marijuana. You know, I mean, if it didn't exist, I would be pleased as punch. But I'm taking a pragmatic view of this whole issue. It is what it is. Let's deal with it and make it the best we can do. Now, as far as revenue goes, it's always been my contention that I feel it would be a terrible mistake for us to allow any kind of marijuana activity strictly to make money. I think that would be the worst reason for us to do it. It has to be for other reasons. If the money should be the cherry on the sundae. It should be something that will help us to augment our actions, but I think it would be a mistake for us to focus on how much money we can get. They're doing that in Colorado, and they're making tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue, but they're also filling up their hospitals and emergency rooms. They have a higher homeless population. There's a downside to it as well. So, you know, I think we need to consider all these things.
Well, I'd like to just respond to a couple things. In no particular order. Number one, this town was settled long before there was any zoning regulations. The zoning was drawn around the existing uses.
Okay.
It did not dictate use, it was around existing uses. And, you know, I'd say that, you know, I'll also add that you passed the marijuana ordinance in 2006 or 7, and you still moved. I mean, you found that, and, you know, you had the ordinance, and you still didn't.
Well, that wasn't the reason we moved.
Well, okay.
It was not.
Whatever. But, you know, my deal on this has never really been around my primary issue with this has never really been around the issue of whether people need marijuana for recreation or medical purposes. It has been around, to me, what I've tried to express is that To me, it's an issue of the reputation and the stature of our community as compared against others that in the state or in the country. And it's really about its reputation and what we have as challenges moving ahead to grow our town, and what are the strengths and values that we want to portray in our town as being important. And I think that's the message I've been trying to get across, and that we have the history of being a marijuana town for the last 40 years. We are a result of this laissez-faire or this permissive behavior. This is what it is. And, you know, it's kind of, you wake up at one day and you say, this is what it is. This is not what it's supposed to be, folks. This is not what attracts the kind of activity, the kind of people, the kind of growth that you want for your community. This is the antithesis of it. It is so far from what you want. I would think, as an elected official, unless you have a vested economic interest, I do not know why you would want this in your community. It does not build families, it does not build community, it does not bring people into the community that contribute to the public betterment. You know, there's nothing about it that builds communities. And in fact, we are struggling. Have been and we continue to struggle because of this stigma and this reputation. And it is inhibiting the success of the businesses that we have in this town because we have this reputation. My hope was that we can try and rectify that somewhat. I know it's tokenism. It's not going to change a whole lot, but if we could advertise that Willits has been there, it's gone through it, it's come out of it, and it sees that there's a better way to the future than embracing this destructive culture. It destructs families, it destructs neighborhoods. I mean, I just don't know how you can embrace it in any of that form way. And it takes nothing away from, they will be able to get their recreation or medical stuff. We're going to be surrounded by it. It's not going to affect us financially. They're going to continue to do business in our community. They continue to get their generators fixed here. They continue to eat their food here. They're going to continue to do everything. I want to be an island, you know. I just want to be a reputational island that we're trying to build a better community for our children. I mean, it's kind of like, it's, you know, the state took on the gambling business, the lottery. What do y'all think of that? How'd that work out? It's a disaster. I mean, it's a disaster. Even casinos, they're a disaster to communities. There's nothing about it. These, you know, they figured this out 10,000 years ago, that drugs don't build communities. You know, they figured it out 100,000 years ago. I mean, they wrote a book about it, you know, of how you have an orderly society and how you build community, and it is not by embracing, you know, the sins of man. I mean, not that you don't have, we all don't have them, but to codify it into government, to me, is just, it's an embarrassment. You know, it is just kind of the extreme embarrassment. It's kind of like, okay, I give up, you know, I give up. Let's try this for a while. Let's, you know, once marijuana's there, well, you know, civilization still seems to be holding by a thread. Let's try cocaine for a while. Let's try something else, you know, let's try to deconstruct some of them, you know, one more layer of fabric that we have been taught for generations as being an essential part of being a prospering society. Let's shed off another layer and see if it still works. And to me, this was a place to me that we had an opportunity, based on our history and based on all of our experiences, to try and forge a little different identity for our community and give the businesses, our schools, our hospital, our churches, our people a little bit of pride in community, a little bit of chance to say, we're not that. You know, somebody explained to me that in a big town, in the city, you know, San Francisco can have marijuana dispensaries, it can have growing things. It's got multiple identities, you know, it's got the Giants, it's got the 49ers, it's got the Golden Gate Bridge, it's got Coit Tower, it's got Fisherman's Wharf. All those things make up San Francisco. And other big cities have that as well. In a little town like this, you know, you don't have that. You're lucky to have one identity. You know, we were on the slow end of one end of the skunk train was probably the identity known most outside of the community for years and years, was one end of the skunk train. You know, not an earth-shattering chart thing to be on the charts, but, you know, it's not bad. Frontier Days, you know, oldest continual rodeo in the state of California. Those were some of the things. Now you talk to anybody anywhere in the lower 48 or wherever, and you know, and talk about where you're from, the identity is the pot culture, the Emerald Triangle, and it's always done in a snicker and a laugh, but it's embarrassing. To me, it's embarrassing. It's not what my family came here to do. It's not what I came on this board to do, was to jump in to let that culture take over our community. To me, it's a wonderful opportunity. The state law gives us we did not have this 5 years ago or 2 years ago, but state law gives us the opportunity to say no. And all it does is it draws a little border around this one little piece of real estate that really isn't, if you don't allow indoor commercial kind of businesses, it wouldn't have a footprint in this community at all. I mean, you can't, it wouldn't, we've got 1 million acres in Mendocino County outside that are, seem to want it to go that way. Seem to me we have a unique opportunity to be, the little diamond surrounded by the rough, and I'm gonna fight for that as long as I'm up here. I think that it's also kind of probably an inappropriate direction to take with kind of a lame duck majority on the city council right now. I think it's something that would, to me, would make, be fair to the community to have this discussion in 4 months when 3 people here may not be sitting here. 2 may not. Well, all 3. Yeah. Whatever. You get my point. I mean, I think it's I think that's a very arrogant decision of a lame duck council to be taking on an issue this important to the future of the community. So I would suggest, if anything, if this thing get tabled till the first of the year. If you don't, if we don't want to just out and out ban it. And and finally, I'd say, I guess, would be this, in that this is a very rapidly evolving topic. There's a lot of communities that are involved in it. There's a lot of nuances in the thought that this little town is going to write the ultimate marijuana regulatory ordinance that is going to be the star by which all other cities in the state, that anticipates all the contingencies of what are the potential, doors that you're cracking open, and what is going to evolve around this initial decision. I think that we, no offense intended, Mr. Lance, but I just think that this is a time to follow, not to lead. If you even decide you want to do this, it's a time to follow, not to lead, because
we might learn from the experiences of
and
Arcata and Santa Rosa and other cities.
You can't help but learn. And once, I do not believe that once you rezone this heavy industrial property as it being with a conditional use permit, being a permitted use in our community, that you will be able to put that genie back in the bottle. I just don't believe you can do it. So that's, my thoughts about it for now.
Can we hear from the public pretty soon?
Yeah, we can.
Well, I have to say, I don't disagree with most of what you said about being defined as the marijuana capital and all this other stuff. That, and I also have felt strongly that you don't want to define a community on the wages of sin, if you will. But I would contend that if we were to take that position, then I believe we need to go one step further, because as we're all aware, alcohol is probably a more dangerous drug to society than even marijuana is, or as dangerous, we'll say. So if we want to ban marijuana for that reason, then I think we need to logically take the next step and ban alcohol from our city limits as
I
well.
think that's a bogus argument.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is. You've got, number one, you've got a drug that is federally, it's a felony, federal felony. You can open up the paper any day of the
Yeah.
week and find asset seizures, people being busted.
But that's for now.
It is a felony, yeah, it is for now. And when the federal government legalizes it, like they have legalized alcohol, then my argument disappears.
Why? It's still, but
It's-
so does that mean that if it's legal, I mean, well, we all know that legal is a fleeting
No.
target. Legality changes with administrations.
Well,
So wait a minute. So if you're saying that right now, because marijuana is illegal under federal law, that it's a bad thing to do, but if the federal government legalizes marijuana, that makes it okay? That makes it a wonderful thing to have in our
no,
community?
it doesn't make it a wonderful thing, okay, but I no longer have the authority to, it's like, I no longer have the authority to regulate it.
But actually, but I think we do, and we will, because that's been pointed out in the California state laws, even though California will permit, it does permit these things, and quite frankly, if the November election legalizes recreational marijuana in the state, I'm pretty certain that the local jurisdictions will still have the right to control marijuana the way they want. So it doesn't become a universal law. It's permitted, but you can say no.
The state of California cannot legalize marijuana. I'm going to open it up to the community. Anybody in the public want to address this item? Come on up to the front. You're going to have a green light, you're going to have a yellow light, you're going to have a red light, and then you're done.
I understand. My name's Bill Barksdale, and I've done a lot of research on this, and you can choose to cut me off after 3 minutes, or if you mind saying something useful, you can let me continue. I'll leave that up to you. I would say regarding using industrial land, that industrial zone areas, using it for cannabis activity can prevent that land from being used for other industrial activities, and therefore by filling it up and not leaving land that other businesses can come then and locate to. Point number one, I think the middle road holds the most promise to identify solutions that can cool this debate down a little bit. I propose that it is not the best use of our law enforcement dollars to enforce a prohibition on cannabis. I'd rather see those law enforcement dollars go to much more dangerous drugs like crack cocaine and heroin, which are also in our community. I was at a discussion this morning where someone said something that kind of hit me. They said if we get rid of medical marijuana, just get rid of that category, it eliminates an entire area of expensive regulation. It then allows employers to treat that intoxicant just like any other intoxicant, like alcohol, like cigarettes, And medical marijuana, when it's used in many treatments like anti-seizure medications, doesn't even have the intoxicant element in it anymore. It's a non-intoxicant, and it does eliminate seizures, and it does have a very definite medical use. And so tests for employers, for instance, who are testing for if someone has marijuana in their system, can then look at their prescription and see, is that the kind that gets you high, or is that the kind that simply prevents you from having seizures? And we know very, very well now, there's lots of documentation that it is an anti-seizure medication and it's extremely effective. It's also effective for people with wasting disease. It's effective for people who are getting cancer treatment, who are being treated for AIDS treatment as a non-nausea medication. Those things are all well documented. So many things here. There's a potential source of revenue here. Licensing fees. I would suggest a licensing fee of between $5,000 to $10,000 as a licensing fee. Regulations. Location concerns, minimal distances from sensitive areas, minimal distances from other pot-related retail stores, zoning distances, a ban on co-locations, a ban on downtown certain areas, criminal areas. There should be criminal checks of staff and people doing it, required insurance, security features. Sampling should be disallowed, a cap on total number of dispensaries, a prevention of...
Kind of wrap it up, Bill.
Of a prevention on clustering, and that can be done with zoning. And of course, these issues of crime and organizational crime. And I think that prohibition encourages crime and encourages heavy-duty crime. I don't think we can enforce a prohibition. That's already been tried in this country. It's a well-documented experiment that was a failure, and I just don't think that it works. I'm sorry that after all the time that you guys had to discuss this, and I've done a lot of research on this that I've
There'll be
limited
plenty of
to
other
3 minutes.
opportunities. This
but-
is not the only time we do this.
Well, so be it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else like to address the council? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Marilyn Bruder, and I'm over at Strong Mountain Industrial Park.
Sure.
And I've been approached several times for people to buy our property and start companies. There's a company in Southern California, it's a biotech company, and they've approached me, and they don't want to invest any money in Willits unless they're sure that the regulations won't backfire on them. And they asked me if the city was gonna follow the Mercer-Fraser, like how Rio Dell and Humboldt are following the rules and regulations. So, and also I deal with a lot of homeless people, a lot. I get at the mini storages, and it seems to me that this town needs money, and that if a company came in and was secured, and we have a perfect place, and also if they sort of did something with the homeless together on our property that we have, because we have quite a few acres that aren't being used. And the mini storage, I'm totally sick of dealing with the homeless and the people and not paying. It's just a really hard business, and it's me that owns it, or our family. It's me that runs it. So if something could come in and give people jobs and be successful in an area that isn't bothered, we're like down the road in nowhere land. I never even knew the place existed until my dad found it 30 years ago. And I know my parents, they started the mini storage, they would agree with something like this in our town.
Thank you. Anybody else? Second, third, and last call? Seeing none. Yeah, I do. I know her sister.
Yeah.
I know her folks.
So I just wanted to respond to a couple things, Bruce, that you said, and I understand that it's frustrating for the public, where we wax poetic for, for long periods of time. But in some ways we earn it because we sit up here for so many hours of other decision making. But just to address a couple of the comments, Bruce, that you made, and I completely understand where you're coming from. I think that you and I just disagree on how to get there, and how to make sure that we're representing the best for our town. But I just want to say that we are following. Fort Bragg has already, I believe, done an ordinance that allows industrially zoned places in Fort Bragg. We are easily, third or fourth down the list of even getting to this part of the conversation, which I really appreciate, Ron, you doing this analysis, because as you mentioned, it would be a process. It would take longer to do. I do disagree that having intoxicants, destroys the fabric of society. I mean, the Napa Valley, I don't suggest that we do this, but the Napa Valley is entirely dependent on the wine industry. And those families and those wine growers are not criminals, and they're not being just taking away from society. They are contributing a lot to those communities, and this happens in Mendocino County and Anderson Valley, in the Ukiah Valley. I mean, they contribute a lot. They don't just take and bring things down, and that's where I see that things could go. There's absolutely negative things. I'm not naive to suggest that there's not, but I do believe that there is more to Willits than cannabis. You mentioned a couple of them, but when I speak to people out in the world, it's a surprising number know about the skunk train, but also what I hear most is what a kind and welcoming community that we have when people come through. So I think there's more to us than that, and that I do think it would, get some press if we took the hard line, but I don't think that would last long term as far as the reputation of our community. And because of that, I do think that there is a timing issue. I understand that this is a lame duck council, but it's two of the folks on here are candidates, and it's certainly I would think, going to be a topic of discussion amongst the candidate nights. I would hope that it is. Because even if we gave direction to an ad hoc meeting to start crafting an ordinance, odds are it would not be approved until the new council. But I am hearing from the business community that there is a desire for certainty. Like, we want to know where the city of Willits is. If we're going to invest in these properties, we want to make sure that the regulations are going to back us up. In the same way that I think that there's more to Willits, I don't think that allowing this would be the only thing bringing in money. Unfortunately, and I appreciate your point that it makes it unavailable for other industrial uses. The fact is that out of our industrial properties, more than 50% is vacant. There is not currently the kind of industrial stuff going on that we'd like. I think this council, at least since I've been on it, has worked to keep industrially zoned properties. There's been a lot of discussions of wanting to turn it into residential or wanting to turn things into that. And I think this council specifically is really interested in maintaining industrially zoned properties so that if it's not manufacturing, that it could be something else that would be providing good jobs. And I think that this would help that if we capped it. And if it couldn't be near a school. We have some pretty serious zoning conflicts. I mean, Blosser Lane came in after that area was an entirely industrially zoned area to find that location because there was only a certain amount of places they could go. But I mean, they're smack dab next to a mill and a solid waste facility. I mean, that we're there first, frankly. So we do have those conflicts already, but I think that by limiting it in recreation, in residential, and moving it into industrial, we could potentially rehabilitate some of those buildings, and those property owners could get investment to improve their properties. And then I think if the money doesn't last for that long in the marijuana industry, then those buildings will be better improved to have other tenants in there. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I don't want to reiterate everything that everyone else has said, but I do think that there is more going on here, and that if we were to move forward with this, it would almost be less of an issue in the community, because it would happen. I would love to get testing labs like Alpha Labs down in Ukiah. I mean, they do a lot of business testing water quality. They could set up a similar lab sort of situation here. Yeah.
All right, well, I think we beat this up and down head and shoulders enough for tonight.
Good. Bruce?
Yeah.
I think Ron suggested that we could have an ad hoc committee, just at least begin the process of narrowing down some of the issues, and that could probably continue before an actual proposal was brought to City Council until after the election. But I think that would be, I think it is timely to move forward, because I think Holly's right, that there's probably not a whole lot of years ahead with the kind of profit margin that is going to bring this kind of industry in as it gets legalized everywhere, which it probably will be. I think that we have an opportunity to at least begin looking at that seriously in this period where there's a transition going on. So I would be in favor of having such a committee, and if it
Well, I would suggest then that those that are interested in serving on that new marijuana ad hoc committee, make your intentions known to me in the next couple of weeks, and we will reform a committee, take another look at it.
Okay.
Well, I'll put my dibs in right now.
Well, it's not going to be on a first-come, first-served basis.
Okay.
And thank you, Ron, for this work.
All right. Do we have any good and welfare this evening?
I do. Some of you may know that longtime local citizen Walter Camp passed away maybe last month, 2 weeks ago. They're having a memorial for Walter at the Art Center on September 11th. There's a lot of things going on that day, unfortunately. I believe it's in the afternoon. I believe Bruce might be playing music.
I will be there.
It's
Walter's an old friend.
Yeah, it'll be a good thing.
Anybody else? So we have one item in our closed session, which is a continuation of our annual performance evaluation of the city manager, and that will be it. I see no announcements coming out of closed session. That's just a personnel matter, so standard yearly evaluation. So anyway, we will retire to closed session and finish up our meeting there. Thank you for joining us.